Hey guys, it's Faye from Feisworld Media, and today we're gonna give you another Zoom webinar video. I know it's been a little while since we released a Zoom related video, but I feel like this one is absolutely necessary. I literally just concluded a very successful investment banking related Zoom webinar session. And during that time and all the preparation leading to that session, I realized just how intricate these settings for the webinars, as well as how we conduct the live session is going to be. So these learnings, I hope will help you if you also work in investment banking, private securities, private equity, law firm, that type of industry. So please let me know if you have any questions below. As always, I'm here to answer your questions. I will also link my contact information if you want to reach out for a training session. I'll be very happy to moderate as well as training your team to run a very successful Zoom webinar for your ultra investors and very large clients. So with that said, let's get started. So you may be wondering, given all the compliance and regulatory requirements, what are some of the things that you can do to also reflect in Zoom webinars? So let me give you some examples if you're new to this. Basically, for these sessions, chat is not allowed. And sometimes when you'll have different presenters and companies join the session, they cannot overlap with each other. So for instance, if company A is asking for investment from people who are joining the Zoom webinar, it's important that company A shows up and leaves the session before company B appears. Let me go ahead and actually show you the exact Zoom webinar setup, as well as what you can do during a live Zoom webinar that helps you control all these things that we're talking about. First, you're going to set up everything just as is, as you normally would, and nothing really changed much here. All right, so you can decide if you need registration. So quick word on that, a lot of people don't realize is that if you enable registration is required, that means people have to enter their first, last name, email as usual. Now, some of you do ask, what if I want to disable registration? That can be really easy, especially if you're managing like an internal meeting where you don't want people who may have technical difficulties to join in without having to worry about, registration. That's fine. With that said, they're still required to actually enter their first and last name. So in the final reports, you're able to see their names. Now, you may be wondering, what if people are like abbreviating using their first, last initial? Those things can get really tricky without registration, because without a unique, let's say, email identifier, it's hard to track down exactly who logged into the call. So I just want to make a remark on that. So authentication, I typically try to disable them because it can be problematic for people who cannot or choose not to create a Zoom username or Zoom account. So the rest is the same. I think host panelists, in terms of training them, onboarding them, I have a separate video. I cannot overemphasize the importance of rehearsing, practicing, oftentimes more than once. Make sure that not only you sound check and test their audio and video, if they have presentations, especially with videos, make sure you run all that through before you run a very important live webinar. Now, the next session, especially when it comes to investment banking, chances are that there is no live Q&A. Typically, for reasons such as features in Zoom that are not allowed for investment banking, oftentimes are chat, Q&A, poll, that sort of thing. So you just want to disable most of them, except enable practice session. This is when you and your team can come in prior to all the attendees showing up to the webinar. You can have your little private practice session that is not seen by the attendees. And another one I really like is the enable host control of panelist appearance. So this one allows you to not only edit the panelists' names, host and co-host, but also allows you to control their virtual background. I'm going to show you real quick how to do that as well. And in terms of making the webinar on demand and things like that, automatically record the webinar, I typically have them turned off, but I do have a checklist for me as a host or a co-host of the webinar, because why? You don't want this webinar to start recording once you're just hopping into the practice session. I typically try to do that right after I already spotlight the right people, ready for the introduction, right before I hit start the webinar. That's when I hit record webinar. But look, if you have a lot of people, you have a very chaotic event, it's not the end of the world, just hit automatically record webinar. Most of those recordings is going to be edited later on anyway. So once you're done, you can just go ahead and hit schedule. So let's go ahead and do that. Let me show you something next, which is about inviting attendees. I would say, you can definitely import CSV or, edit, and you can just add them in one at a time. So one thing I would like to say is when you have so many attendees coming from different banks and different, investment sources, what you want to do is first, last name, and in parentheses, I would say list their company. This is a really optimal view. I do recommend to people in general. So it's very, very flexible. Let's go into preview. So this preview will allow you to actually upload any branding elements you want. So for instance, on the right-hand side here, you can see that you can change basically the name of the basically panelist as well as co-host, but you can also add a virtual background. Now you can do that by simply click on add branding here. You can add additional name tag template as well. I usually tend not to go too crazy about that, but you can add a background. So for instance, think about the messaging you want, the brands you want to include, the logos. If you want people to send questions and things like that, you actually want to list this in the upper right-hand corner or left-hand corner. Make sure, once you are speaking in front of the virtual background, you as the speaker is not blocking the important information. So I just want to call that out. And once this is done, you can click on save, like so. And you can customize it. This preview window is also really helpful, especially when you have multiple speakers. And whenever you want to change it, you can click on this little edit pencil icon. You can change the name to Fei Wu, and you can even change the default name tag. You can remove this as well. And whenever you want to edit the branding information again, you can actually go into branding right here, and you can delete, you can upload new default if you want to. So let me say a quick word about default. If you have a virtual background already listed here, you'll have the option to click on make default. So this one means anybody else who's joining your session gonna automatically have it in as their virtual background. I wouldn't recommend this if you have so many speakers and some of them simply don't need this official company background. You don't want to do that. You want to do exactly what we did just now to manually update and select the ones for the right speakers. So if you don't need it, just simply get rid of it. And that's it. So with that said, let's actually go into the Zoom webinar to see what you can control. Let's start the practice session. Remember, if you have been following me, you know that you can start the practice session at any time. And I'm gonna go ahead and just enable my video here. As you can see, it's already applied. I did not choose to have my virtual background. Just so you know, at any time you want to manually add a virtual background or change it to something different, you can do that right inside the Zoom webinar by going to choose virtual background. And go ahead and you can blur your background as usual. You can choose your selected background. This is the one I use regularly for the Women Leaders Association. With that said, I'm gonna just change it to none. Now, let me go ahead and show you important settings inside the webinar. First, you want to make sure that you click on participants. Why do you want to actually open up participants? Because once you're running a session, it's actually really important to see the list of names in the right-hand panel. You'll notice that there is the More button. From here, you can access so many critical elements. Typically, what we want to do for investment banking Zoom webinars, we actually disable raise hand. I don't even know why that's there. It's not very useful. Make sure that all the attendees follow the host view, and that's it. The only check marks are just these three typically for us. Now, what about chat? This is really important. If you do not allow anyone, including attendees and hosts and panelists, to chat with each other and because of compliance issues, what you want to do is open up chat here in the right-hand corner, the three dots. You're going to say panelists can chat with each other, but not with everyone else. And for the attendees, they cannot chat with anyone. So by default, this is a very secure line of communication. So if you don't want your hosts and panelists to chat with each other, that's easy. Just write each other an email, inform your speakers ahead of time. That's it. Now, the next thing is about screen sharing. We ran into this actually. So what you want to do is click on the up arrow right next to share screen and click on advanced options. Why is this important? Because turns out that by default, Zoom webinar only allows one panelist to share at a time. And by default, it's not even one panelist. It's actually just a host only. What you want to do, if you want your other speakers, AKA panelists, to be able to share their screens, play videos and things like that, you have to check these radio buttons on the right. Now, you will notice all of this during the rehearsal. I'm not trying to give people more permissions than they need, but it's really important to notice these things. Otherwise, you're going to run into a situation where you say things like, oh, sorry, please give me a moment, and you're going to scramble and not sure how to actually turn on screen share for other panelists. So that's really about it, guys. If you have any more questions, because every single webinar is so different, please let me know in the comments below. Again, you can contact me and schedule a training session with me if you choose to. Now, the last thing I will say, which I cannot show the data because it's confidential, is the fact that you have such powerful access to analytics immediately after the Zoom webinar. So what can you have access to? For instance, you can see how many people registered. These are the basics. How many people ended up showing up. You can even see people are calling in from different devices by noticing that, 46 people registered, but there are 41 people or logins, for instance. My favorite are attendance report. So based on the session I just concluded, I'm so excited, as you can see from my energy. Over 90% of the people who registered were in that session. Not only that, there is something called the attendee report. Yes, it's right there available under Zoom report. You're able to actually see by name, email, when this person joined the session, when she leaves, and the duration of her attendance. And that is so, so powerful. With that said, actually, let me go ahead and show you how to find the report. So once inside your Zoom account, go to reports on the left-hand side, and here you have usage, meeting, and webinar. And we're talking about the webinar here. So from here, you have the registration report, you have attendee report, performance report, Q&A, poll, and survey. Again, as I mentioned before, for investment banking, oftentimes you don't really get to do much over there. And then from here, how come there's no report? You can actually backdate that. So I got a filter on that once again. You can see how many viewers and the performance. So take a look at the next video. I believe you're gonna like it because YouTube thinks you will. And let me know, and I hope YouTube is right.